Normally, I start my podcast with my theme song and come in and all bubbly and talking about good morning, afternoon, or evening. But the thing that we've looked towards ending the past few weeks and months and getting rid of the commercials and all the things around the election that's come and gone. And honestly, I'm not feeling very excited or very jovial today. We're in the aftermath. And what's in my head is that this America has spoken. And the 47th president of the United States is going to be Donald Trump. While that's disappointing to virtually and figuratively and practically half the country, it's also the reality of where things are and also where things still have yet to get to in this country. There's a segment of people, pretty large segment of people in this country, who would rather elect the person they elected than a woman, and especially a black woman. And it's sad because in 2024, we still are climbing up a very, very slick ladder. And occasionally we slide back. Occasionally we find ourselves in positions where we are doing post-mortem on a process that is bewildering, frustrating, scary even, challenging, and so many other words I can associate to what has been the experience, not only just in this country, but around the world for the last 48, 72 hours, and a lot more. But if you notice, there are no protests. There's no rampant claims of fraud. We don't anticipate attacks on our nation's capital. There's a certain dignity and class about the way that this election has been handled that I'm very certain would not be the case if it went the other way. Already I see in certain circles and observing social media and etc. where people are trying to make statistical claims to back up their claims of 2020 fraud because of low voter turnout and how low voter turnout was. There's a saying, when we show up, we win. When we vote, we win. Participate, we win. And there was a downturn in participation for various reasons. There are many people in this country who have apathy, who just are simply tired of this whole political process, the same yin and yang existing, and that we're just kind of seesawing back and forth between the powers that be and the powers that are chosen to be for us. I've long talked about the need for a third party, and not just a third party that exists, but a third party that's present, robust, impactful. And while I have no bad feelings towards Bernie Sanders isn't that third party. Bernie Sanders is one individual who stays relevant, but in the grand scheme of things does not impact and make change that's needed. We need a third party to split up the comfort that the two-party system exists in today. And it will take time. It will take a lot of time. It will take someone stepping out as an independent and bringing a bunch of people with them. It will take time before this nation is ready for a woman to serve in the highest office in the land. That was very clear in the votes. It was very clear in the conversation leading up to it. It was very clear in 2016. This entire political season, it was very clear that the bar set for a woman is not the same as a bar that's set for a man. And that's sad. But it's a reality we face and a reality we're going to exist in the foreseeable future. But I do want to take a moment and show respect and admiration to an amazing, classy, true American concession speech that Kamala Harris delivered at Howard University. Again, something that may or may not have happened if the tables were turned. I think we got a preview and a reality of that in 2020, but I wish we had the opportunity to see what it would be like to have a woman lead this nation. It may happen at some point. Who knows? Glass ceilings are still being broken all around this world. But as we will find out, the next 4 years will be what the next 4 years are. And we'll also find out if lessons have been learned by the Democratic Party. If someone will step forward as an independent to really, really break up and create chaos, if you will. Good chaos, good trouble, as my fraternity brother, the late John Lewis, used to say. But create good trouble for Democrats and Republicans. Because that's really what's needed. Because as long as it's a two-party system, we'll be doing this every 4 years. But Donald Trump will be our 47th, and congratulations on an amazing campaign. I think it was 107 days that Kamala Harris ran, garnering a ton of support in such a short period of time. And so whatever her next steps are, I hope that she will continue being a civil servant and serving for the people. But there's a ton of disappointment. Not many of us, well, clearly half the country, but half the country did not want to be here again, considering all the ramifications, lack of accountability, justice not being equal or blind as a result of this. Investigations, prosecutions are going to end just because simply a swearing in happens in January. We teach our kids that doing things wrong is not the right way. Breaking the law is not the right way. Being a good person is what you should do. And yet time and time again, we find that there are rules for some and there are rules for us. Accountability is not a norm. Repercussions are, tagged cancel culture, right? I've always said there's no such thing as cancel culture. It's called accountability. It's called repercussions for your actions. But even the justice system lacks that firm line between right and wrong. Enforcing repercussions and accountability equal under the eyes of everyone. It's not the norm. And so while state convictions will stand and things may wait for 4 years or however long it takes, paying for one's crimes or paying for one's actions seems to be something that's easily deferred as long as you get people to vote you into office. We'll see what the next 4 years brings. Adapt to Adopt provides recreational support to adopted children and youth through our recreational support groups, mentoring programs, sports and community service projects, and more. As a sponsor of What's in My Head, find out more information at rebrand.ly/DHPA2A. Again, Adapt to Adopt. Find out more information at rebrand.ly/DHPA2A. The last thing that's on my mind, and you'll notice there's only two things this time. Resolve. The definition, or the noun definition of resolve, is firm determination to do something. Now, I for years had a borderline, somewhat naivety to having my utopian beliefs that people are generally good people who care about their fellow man. Over the last decade and even recent events, that belief has eroded somewhat in varying amounts. A little bit, a lot, a little bit, a lot. And I've either, experienced or witnessed people and events to the contrary of that utopian belief. Despite it all, I and those I care about continue to raise our chins and move forward for the betterment of our lives, those that we care about, and hopefully positively impacting our communities as well. Now, talking about the election, I spoke to my dad last night and asked him about the results of the election, and his response really personified that resolve that he and so many like him who, he's been alive for 82 years. He's seen more than I've forgotten. But more that resolve that they possess. And I found it interesting, his response to that was very short, very simple. Um, it's just another election. I've seen a lot of them. When I asked him about the results and how he felt, it's just another election. I've seen a lot of them. That goes to, you think about those who helped get this country to where it is. Remember, it was here, we're here. Some people it's here, some people it's here. Varying levels of progress. But those that have seen this country at much, much darker times and who are now experiencing just a little bit more light, or maybe a lot more light, depending on their environment and what's happened in their lives. To them, this is not that bad. The results of the election, it is not that bad. The potential future, depending on which way things go, is not that bad because they've seen and lived through so much worse. But whatever happens going forward, I urge you to put yourself, your loved ones first and first. Say that again. Put yourself and your loved ones first and first. Focus on your American dream. Or scratch that. Your utopian dream, whether it's American or not American. Navigate around the negativity in this world and maintain a firm resolve to enjoy this life that you have. Another thing that's happened a lot recently is the passing of many people. I see it on social media. I've experienced it in my circles and organizations I'm a part of. It seems like every week at a minimum, but sometimes multiple times a week, I get an alert or see a notice for someone passing. Putting yourself first is placing the things that you have control over as the primary focus, making sure that you live a life that's enjoyable and happy. There's a lot of negativity in the world. Absolutely, 100%. Tons of negativity in the world. But you can't harp on it. At some point, mourn, decompress, plan for the future, and move forward. Resolve is that determination again to do something. And let that determination be enjoying this life. One of the things I say all the time, enjoy life because life should be fun. If you follow me on social media or just been in my life for a long time, it's something I've said for many, many years. Enjoy life because life should be fun. And the fact that life is so short, these things that we really have no control over, that yes, impact our life, but should not run our lives, we can't focus on. We can focus on what we can control. And the things that may impact us that we can't control or that we had no control over them impacting us, we can adapt, we can adjust, we can solve, as in problem solving, and we can take the next step forward. And that's what we're going to have to do. Adapt, problem solve, adjust, move forward. Repeat, repeat, repeat. And that's something we can do. And that's something we will do. And that's what's in my head. So I did a little Google search and looked up the term authentic leadership. And Google AI, if you're familiar, I've talked about AI on this podcast a couple times now. But the definition that came from Google AI was authentic leadership is a management style where leaders act in a genuine and sincere way and bring their whole selves to work. Authentic leaders are known for their integrity, vulnerability, and ability to inspire trust and loyalty in their employees. Now, I've shared my professional career, personal career, leadership roles that I've had in nonprofits and things like that over the course of the 5 seasons of this podcast. And so a lot of these things that I'm about to talk about resonate. And so I found an article in Forbes, the 5 qualities of authentic leadership. And they say that authentic leadership at its very core means that whether you are at work or away from work, your thoughts and actions are consistently aligned. They say when leaders are able to be their genuine selves, both privately and publicly, they have more energy and to create and to innovate. Conversely, inauthentic leaders do damage to an organization. They destroy engagement, increase employee turnover. They tend to be less productive than their authentic counterparts, and they experience a higher rate of burnout. Now, I will say I'm pretty authentic, at least I think I'm authentic, but I've also experienced that burnout. So I don't know where that puts me at, but we'll figure that out later. Now, here are the 5 qualities of authentic leadership as they convey it in the Forbes article. The first one, purpose and passion. They say knowing your purpose helps drive your decisions. It also allows you to know what to say yes or no to, a huge problem for me for years. The more decisions you can take that are aligned with your purpose, the less stress you feel and the less stress your team will feel as well. Now, I 100% agree with this because I think having a clear direction, whether it's your purpose, whether it's organizational direction, um, if that aligns with your passions, it makes it a lot easier to do your job. As a current people leader, I find it very difficult to do my job when the direction is not clear, especially when it comes from higher in my pay grade. The second one they say is values and behavior. I think it's self explanatory, but here's what they say: values are the core of who you are. Authentic leaders naturally demonstrate their core values through their behaviors. Values and behaviors. What you say is what you do. What you think is what you show. Um, so I think that's an easy one to get our heads wrapped around. What your values are, how your behaviors align, makes for a good, successful, authentic leader. The third one, relationships and connectedness. Now this one hits home for me, but I'm gonna read this one first. In her audiobook, she says, or the article says, the power of vulnerability. Dr. Brené Brown explains that at its core, leadership is really about relationships. Authentic leadership requires leaders to take risk, embrace their vulnerabilities, personally connect with others, and show up as imperfect, real people. I pride myself as a servant leader and as a people leader professionally in being someone who establishes connections and relationships with the people who directly report to me. I don't want to feel like a drummer just marching orders, marching orders, marching orders. Do this, do this, do this. You have to be able to relate to them and build these relationships so that when times get tough, they can rely on your authentic self to get them through the tough times. Number 4, they say self-discipline and consistency. According to executive coach Brittany Anderson, quote, self-discipline is the ability to resist impulses, maintain focus, and see projects through to completion. She notes that, quote, leaders with a strong sense of self-control are more likely to be diligent and engaged in their work. I think in especially corporate America, I've put forward a very strong base of self-discipline, very even keel. You can talk to any of the people who worked under me for years. They'll tell you I'm very stoic when it comes to how I handle situations at work. I think it's good to be that way as an authentic leader because you don't want to show panic because your team will panic. The same way, I played football for 30 years. If I show panic and I'm a leader of a football team, guess what? We're all going to panic. But you also have to be consistent, not just in how you react to things, but how you handle things and the steps you take to get out of those situations. Last thing they say is heart and compassion. Authentic leaders are able to inspire others through kindness, flexibility, support, and empowerment. When you treat others with compassion, you cultivate people who want to work for you, not because of what you do, but because of who you are. Now, probably one of the best examples and the most vague way I can describe this is someone who worked under me had a very, very personal situation going on in their life that severely impacted their productivity and performance. Now, some people might take a different approach. I embraced and the ability to say, hey, one of the things I've learned, let me step back for a second. A long time ago in high school, AP English, I think it was the feel, felt, found method. I don't remember the author who came up with it or where the genesis of it was, but it basically says you show empathy by saying, I know how you feel because I felt the same way, but I found by doing X, Y, and Z, so on and so forth. And so applying that feel, felt, found method, it's amazing that you remember things from high school that you never think you would use in life. but it's something I've used in life for a long time, is that feel, felt, found method. Embracing that and showing empathy got the person not only through the situation at work, because remember, you spend 8 hours of your time at least with people who are outside of your household. And so if you have difficulties in personal life, stress at home, whatever the situation is, and you need to go to work and there's no empathy for that home life stress that you have, now you're just surrounded 16, 17 hours a day with stress. And so the ability to show compassion, have that empathy, allowing them to get back to their normal productive self, despite the things they went through, makes for a great, authentic leader, I think. You have to be able to relate to the people you work with so that they can relate to you and you all can work together to be more productive. So, recapping real quick, 5 qualities of authentic leader: purpose and passion, values and behavior, relationships and connectedness, self discipline and consistency, and heart and compassion. Check out the Forbes article. The title is The 5 Qualities of Authentic Leadership. Now, you may be wondering why I'm talking about authenticity. Woo, get that one out 5 times. Authenticity. I want to bring in my guest for this episode, Dr. Norma Hollis. And let me tell you about her real quick. She is a transformational strategist who has spent 30 years, 30, doing research into human nature. She writes, develops, and implements programs for human development, is an international speaker and phenomenal coach specializing in transforming the lives of people who want to live the authentic life they were born for. And finally, she is the leading authority on authenticity, as affectionately known, I love this name, by the way, as the godmother of authenticity. Dr. Norma, welcome to Dave's Head. How's it going?
Dave, it is going fantastic, and thank you so much. I'm excited about being your guest today and getting into Dave's head. How sweet.
I appreciate it. I'm excited to talk about authenticity, and we're going to get into some of the questions that I have and topics I want to discuss later. But in the world that we're in today, when this episode drops and the implications of everything that's happening, authenticity, I think, is one of those topics we need to be talking more about. So I'm very happy to have you on. Before we get into the Q&A, as I always do with my guests, I know I gave you a brief intro, but I like for my guests to do it in their own words. So if you could take a moment, tell the people who you are, what you do, and what you're about.
Well, thank you. I appreciate it. I am Dr. Norma Hollis, and I am the godmother of authenticity. And I am that because I have dedicated my life to understanding what authenticity means. It started from an actual doing things about it when I was 28. And that's when I realized I had become my parents' version of who they thought a Black woman should be in America. So I had the husband, we had cars, we lived on the top of a hill with a white picket fence, and all those things that you strive for when you're a child. And I realized I was miserable. And I didn't know what to do with myself because I didn't know who I was. So that's when I said, well, let me just back off a little bit from life and let me figure out who am I. And that started a journey of researching who am I. It started out by me identifying energies that live within me. And I found 9 different energies. And I related each of them to a different animal because that's how I could connect with them. And then for the next 30 years, I began to put this grid together and understand what each box meant. And well, actually, I did a lot of research first. I looked at astrology, numerology, a lot of esoteric, psychology, Jung, Freud, all kind of stuff to research to put together these 9 energies that I saw in me. And when I figured I had something, so I spent 30 years, as I said, figuring out what does each box mean and how does it relate astrologically, connectively. And what I found out in that process is how you can be channeled information when you ask for it and it can come to you. And what came up with this grid, it's phenomenal because there's assessment that goes with it. And the way it scores, it gives you so much insight into who you are, what you need in your life, who you should be around, what your teams need. It just goes in multiple ways. And all of these deal with the energy that it takes to be authentic. When you think about it, our society doesn't teach us authenticity, doesn't teach us the energy within ourselves, does not teach us self awareness. So, this is largely a self awareness tool and an energy tool to understand yourself and to manage yourself. And it's taken years, and I was writing the whole time. So, anyway, at this point, I have an online school that represents everything I've written about authenticity. I certify people to teach it and train it. We're very much interested now in getting it into educational and corporate environments because it changes people's lives. It brings them back to their authentic self. And in writing, what I do is I find gaps in society and seek to fulfill them. So there's a huge gap with authenticity. There's so much inauthenticity going on. So that's a summary of what I'm about.
Okay. And you talked about schools and education. What do you see as the benefit to authenticity being taught, whether it's in elementary, middle, high school, or all the above? Where do you see the benefit to that being taught and how it can benefit society?
Well, it certainly makes a difference because there is no formal curriculums anywhere that I know of that teaches self awareness. So we did look at that. And what we put together with my group is that in elementary school, children need to learn about their inner voice, about the voice that speaks within, so that they can have that fortitude that comes when you know who you are. Because when you know who you are, you don't go for the okey doke so much. You really have, more direction. The outer voice, which represents how people perceive you, could be taught in the middle school because that's when there's a conflict about who are your peers and who's your friend and who's not your friend and those kind of things that can be very confusing. And then the expressive voice, which represents who you become in the world and how you live your life, is definitely set up for high school as they're making the decision of transitioning into the real world. Now, on the college campuses, what one of our hopes is to be able to give our assessment and teach the grid to incoming students. Because the challenge incoming students have is their parents want them to do this thing that's big in the world because money's coming in it, and they expect in the time the child is going, for income, they have it set. But in reality, what research shows is that children are going to be happier when they follow their own gifts and talents, who they were born to be. And with the world of AI coming up, where there's going to be so much intellectual stuff taken over by AI, it's going to be important that we have the creative people around to continue the creative work because that's what's going to distinguish us and make us authentic. So that's how I would use it again. I would also use the grid with the teachers, the instructors at all levels to help them coalesce and have a philosophy to work around that can go. I mean, imagine like a young child that learns their gifts and talents when they're in elementary school and then grows up for their parents to teach them how to maximize that gift. It was a gift given to them at birth. It's a gift. And it's who they are and what comes most natural to them. Why should they go learn AI or computers when they're an artist or or a horticulturist or something? They should go into where their gifts are. And so that's the whole foundation behind the whole authenticity piece that I'm doing.
Gotcha. Well, somebody that's in IT, I'm thankful that I didn't have, wasn't forced to learn art or anything like that because I'm not an artist at all.
It goes both ways,
Thank,
yes, I get
yeah,
it.
I'm thankful I had AP maths and physics and all that stuff and computer science because yeah, I could do a mean stick figure. That's what I got. That's all I got.
Sometimes that's all it needs.
Listen, as long as the message is conveyed, right? That's all that
That's
matters.
right.
I know you talked about the genesis of how this started and what guided you to authenticity, but I want to go back to the beginning and think about the very first question you wanted to answer around this. What was that first question you wanted to answer?
Who am I? Who am I? Because I became my parents' version. I came to the world thinking, you follow your parents. They know what's best for you. And so that's what I did. And they did know what's best for me in certain ways. And of course, I never understood that, parents aren't gods. They may be God to me, but they're not God. And they have their faults. I maybe couldn't see them. I know when I was a child, I used to wonder, I wonder if my family's dysfunctional. Heck yeah, they were dysfunctional, very much so, but I sensed it, but I couldn't figure out how or why. I just knew that something wasn't right. And I think all of us have that. So the question of who am I is a question I think all of us ask. I think I asked my question earlier than many people because a lot of people don't ask it until they've been in the workforce for a couple of decades and they realize it's not working right. And then they're saying, well, what's up? But I asked that from that first marriage that I was, supposed to get married to a man who had resources, and I did that. But I forgot there's a whole bunch of other things that my dysfunctional family didn't teach me that I had to learn on my own. So who am I is the question that I was seeking to answer.
Gotcha. And isn't the question of who am I and figuring that out I mean, I know it's the root of authenticity, but even ongoing, shouldn't you constantly be evaluating the answer to that question as you grow, mature, build families, change jobs, build a career, all these different aspects of being an adult? isn't that a question you should ask over and over and over again?
Well, I don't usually use the word should, but I'll take it on this case. Yes, we should ask that question. But what happens with this so often is we get caught up so early. We have babies early, and of course, that ties us to making sure we have income at a certain level for the rest of our lives, at least for the next 18, 20 years or so. And that's one thing that holds us back. We get told about, we feel how important it is. I got to be an adult so I can be responsible. And we get a mortgage and cars and we feel like we can't pay it because we overextended ourselves. And then a lot of this happens early. You know, our authenticity gets stripped from us as early as our infancy and our preschool years. Because in infancy, a baby's desire is to cry. I mean, they cry when they need to. They do whatever. And if they don't stop crying, they don't get what they need sometimes. So they learn it's not authentic to cry all the time. You have to do this. That's the minor part of it when they acquiesce to approve to please their parents. But then you go to preschool and you learn that everybody loves it when I sing. They love it. They love it. And I love to sing. Mommy, I'm home. I can sing. Yada, yada. Making noise. And mama says, it's been a long day and I'm really tired. Why don't you go watch TV until dinner's ready? And so you step back. Mama doesn't like me to be myself. So then you start being somebody else. And that just continues and continues and continues because your goal is to please others so you can get what you need. And as far as you know, that's what it takes. And to please others, you have to be somebody else sometimes. And by the time you get to be in college and what have you think mother knows best, you do what they say. But I mean, who knows what 20 years is going to bring? I mean, how many of us knew that we could use a device and call India or somewhere across the world in a few years? Nobody could predict that. So who can predict what AI is going to bring next? So to say someone should go into AI as a career and that's not their gift is a misnomer. It's leading them down the wrong direction, takes them away from their authenticity. So, in my first career, I was in early childhood. I had degrees in early childhood. I directed Head Start programs. And that's when I saw these happy-go-lucky children learning who they are. And my second career was a business. I was the first Black woman to own a speaker bureau for Black speakers. And that's when I met people who, as adults, were saying, I lost myself. I've been in the workforce for 20, 30 years, and I had to be who they wanted to be. So I've lost who I am. And so that happens to everybody, but they just don't realize it because they don't take time to reflect. When you reflect, life gives us so much that we don't take time and don't realize the importance of reflecting. But when you reflect, you realize these things. You talk to yourself, you get feedback, you examine your day, you examine your week, you examine your month, you examine your year. You see how things have shifted. You make changes in your mind, you make changes in how you do things. You do it consciously, and that's what helps you to grow. When you do it unconsciously, it's because you have to. A tragedy happened, an urgency happened, and you had to shift. But it's so much easier if you shift first by being connected with yourself.
Hmm. No, that's a powerful answer, and I would take a step back and make a joke, even though it's a powerful answer. That I think Terminator told us what happens with AI. Um, Terminator movies, in case those out
Oh
there don't know
yeah,
what I'm talking about.
Schwarzenegger and all that. I remember
Yeah,
that.
hopefully it's not foreshadowing. But I will say one thing, one word you mentioned in your entire thing that's stuck with me is acquiesce, which is one of my favorite words in the entire English language. I have no idea why. It was a word that I learned when I was SAT prepping way back in the day, and I just love the word acquiesce. Just a very, very, very fun fact. That's
It's a
all.
beautiful word. It is a beautiful word. Yes.
Yeah. So let's talk about social media real quick. In the world of social media, corporate code switching, or even individual code switching, and so many other lanes that people have to travel in order to get through life, how does someone feel authentic? I mean, there's a lot of things out there that pull on your authenticity.
Well, that's an interesting question because I did a study about 3 years ago, and I asked people their greatest fear, frustration, and challenge with regard to authenticity. The first thing they said was being able to say what's on their mind. And the second thing they said is, what does authenticity feel like? And I thought that was such an interesting question, especially to be said by so many people. And it confused me at first because I wasn't sure how to answer that. And then I remembered the many, many years that I lived with a high level of anxiety. And that's not what authenticity feels like. So as I examined it more and asked some of my students that I have been working with, we kind of all agreed that authenticity feels peaceful. It feels like you know where you're going. You feels confidence. It feels comfortable. Um, when you're authentic, you know who you are. You mentioned decision making in your five people, and one of the things I talk about with the values piece that I have on integrity in my grid is that when you know your values, you make decisions faster. You don't have to wade through stuff so much because you know where your truth lies, and you can look at the question and compare it to your truth, and that helps you make a decision a lot easier.
Hmm. Absolutely. Um, so one of the things I was thinking about when I came up with this question about social media is it's gotten a lot easier to not be authentic um, because of social media. I think um, the word trending, right, wasn't a word 20, 30 years ago, but the attachment to trending and going viral and the inauthentic ways that people do that, whether it's for money, whether it's for notoriety, whether it's just to say, "Hey, I went viral one time." Um, Social media really drives the inauthentic push to get to those different, plateaus, whether it's financial, whatever. How do we take a step back and remove ourselves, if you will, from the attachment, the addiction, the whatever you want to call it, to social media that drives that inauthenticity?
Well, it's really critical to um, establish one's separation from social media to a certain extent. I really have a great deal of concern for the next generations for a number of reasons. One is, how do you know what's real and what's fake? They're at the point now that first on social media you can't tell so much because anyone can be anyone they want to be, and they can make any kind of fake stuff they want. You can't tell by the things that you do because people are, like AI, for example. You're going to have robots that mimic people. They do it now. You have voices that come on. You don't know if it's real or not. And then you look at population. The population went from 2.5 billion in 1950 to over 8 billion now, just 60 years later. So what's going to happen in the next 50 years when everybody that's having babies, is it going to be to 100 million? I mean, 100 billion? So where does that go? And with so many people in the world, everyone gets more insignificant. So everyone is vying to be heard, and social media is used as a way to be heard. Hear me, listen to me. Here's my post. Here's a bigger post. Here's a bigger viral thing, and so we get addicted to it to the point that some people spend all their time. I don't understand it, but they spend so much time on it that they don't have a life. That their life is dependent on fake stuff, and so it's a real challenge. And I don't have the answer for that except to be more authentic, to help people become more authentic, to realize who they are, to step into the gifts that they have and be more aligned with those gifts. How can those gifts, do something to the world? I'm all about making a difference. How can your gifts make a difference? How can you help in your own circle? You can't change the whole world, but in your own circle, you can make the differences of authenticity that helps those around you be authentic. And most importantly, parents and grandparents role model authenticity so that the younger people who will never have the experience of relationships that I had as a child because there's too many people and too much inauthenticity around. So it's up to everyone. The older you are, the more responsible you are for helping the younger people do that. But on the other hand, you've got society drawing them in so fast on so many ways that they research. When I was in the 70s reading books, they were just starting the research on the brain. And what I've learned is when the powers that be get the research, they always use it to strengthen their power that be role. And so that's what they're doing. They learn so much about psychology and about human nature that everything is twisted to make sure that they gain the lead. And if we don't realize that and keep accepting the fakeness, then it will just continue. So it's up to every individual, like you having your podcast and exposing people and being in your fifth season, so having success with it and discussing things like this. So if people can just turn a little light on that and through reflection and realizing more of who they are and what their gifts are and how to use them and looking at their children's gifts and how to develop those, that's how we create the better world. But if we just all succumb to what the advertisers tell us and what society tells us and what a friend of mine calls it, the incarceration that we're all in trying to follow and do something with, we're all doomed. And we keep having all the babies so that the population increases. Where is the consciousness? Where is the leadership that's going to do something other than take everybody to space or blow everything up? I mean, where are we going? So I'm a little
Yeah, no,
passionate about it. What can I say?
oh, please continue. I was waiting for a break there because I was when you talked about childhood in the '70s. I'm a product of the '70s, born in '77, and so we're the last generation, the streetlight generation, right? Where you had to be home, you had to be on that stoop by the time that streetlight came on.
Right.
And so, speaking of things that today's youth will never experience, I mean, there may be some old school parents who kind of enforce that in different neighborhoods, but a lot of students or a lot of youth don't even go outside, so they're not even coming home by the streetlights because they're in the house playing video games or gaming or doing whatever.
By
So it's
themselves.
definitely it's a very very different world. I mean, I had to read a book before in the summertime during summer break. I had to read a couple pages in a dictionary before I could even go outside and play.
Good for
That's
your
how
mother.
I
I
grew
like
up.
her.
Yeah, but it's interesting you talk about fakeness and all that stuff, and let's get into politics a little bit. Um, when this episode actually drops, there will, I mean, I'll say hopefully, because we never know with the election cycle, we will have an elected president because this drops next Friday from when we're recording. Truth, honesty, authenticity, they're not exactly words that are associated with our political experience or political environment right now. So, how do we, or what has to change in politics in order for authenticity, for truth, for honesty to be the perceived norm going forward?
Well, the first thing that needs to happen is President Harris needs to be identified as President Harris really soon. The one thing that her campaign brought out to me was that joy. You can't see it, but on my grid, the bottom one is net wealth, which says abundance. It's not money as net wealth, it's abundance and joy. Because, and what it did for me is it really turned it back on to recognize how much we've been missing joy in our world because we have been driven so much by the negative side. Now, why that is, obviously, it's a fear based society anyway, and you've got media, feeding and all that. So, with or without President Harris, it still brings down to each one of us making the decision to be authentic. And that decision, again, is probably easier made by the older generation because the younger aren't even recognizing what authenticity and realness is. They're coming into the fake world to begin with. So it's a real, I think we're at a real important time in history of the world, to make a decision as the human beings on the world to what kind of world do we want, and it is a global situation because the same right and left wing is almost in, from what I can tell, is in every population on the planet. They may call it something different, but it's the same thing. So we have this global manipulation, and even the parties are manipulated by the same sources, pretty much, or so it seems. They just keep us all busy, so we don't interfere with what they're doing. So the taking time to reflect on who you are, recognizing the role you can play, having more clarity about who you are, what your gifts and talents are, how to use them in the world, bringing more relationship and having your children not spend so much time on screen time and more time in building relationships. Those are the things, but they all come down to individual households, communities, families. And so, the hands are now pretty much, society can't change it all by itself, no matter what. And Oprah said years ago, I don't have the money to fix Africa. And it just keeps getting worse. It keeps getting worse. So it's up to each one of us, you and me, sharing the word. And even if we inspire just one person who's inspired to gain the passion that we have and do something. And if we keep inspiring and inspiring. When I was a kid, I used to think I was the only one because no one in my circle that I grew up had the passion to make a difference. But now I realize there's millions of us, millions of us. And if we collectively work on it, we'll do more rather than everyone being in their silo. So it's not about me making my money. It's about us doing something together so that we all make money and make a change, or we all make change and make money, whichever direction you put it in. But it's still about collectivity because no one can do it by themselves.
Yeah, it's the each one teach one, right? The pay it forward principle.
Absolutely.
But you got into community there for a second, so I want to dive into that for a second. The feeling of community. Talking about being the streetlight generation. One of the things we experienced, at least I did growing up, was if I messed up in the community, any person in that community would snatch me up, take care of me, bring me home, then I get snatched up and taken care of again.
Right.
But that doesn't seem to exist really, right? That authentic community. Where do we lose that if we want to dive into that, and how do we get that back?
And where we lost it is a good question, and you're right, it's not there. I was talking to a friend recently about how neighbors just drop stuff in the street and don't even pick it up. I mean, that's not community. That's just, I don't know what that is. But and I imagine there are some communities that do have that cohesiveness, but they're few and far between. I think a part of that became when we decided that me is more important than we. So there's research done by a guy. The book is called Pendulum, and the name escapes me at the moment. But he's a major author, a literary agent, over 100 titles on New York Times list. But he did research about human nature over 3,000 years, and he in the book called Pendulum talks about every 40 years the pendulum shifts from human beings from focusing on me to focusing on we. So we're in this cycle now of we. It starts by the music. The music guides us to where we're going. They're the receivers of the future, if you will. And then we move with that. So the music of around 2003 is when the current cycle started. And when I heard this guy talk about this, the 40-year period, we're right in the middle of that because it's been 20 years since 2003. It's 2024 now. So the word that he used for this 40-year cycle is authenticity. So we are really at the apex of our saturation of authenticity at this time. And that's really, really important because we're going to be moving away from it in the next 20 years. So that's why it's so important that now, while we're in this we focus, that we collectively do what we can, because as we transition out of it to a next me cycle, it's going to be far more focused on the individual and what I can do and what's more important for me. And the we philosophy gets set aside a bit. So we're at the time that it's important to recognize this and to do something about it, particularly those of us who understand that.
Well, I tell you, I hope we're not at the apex because it doesn't feel like a good apex right now. I feel like we need to keep going up. But yeah, it's an interesting
Michael Drew,
concept.
that's his name, Michael Drew. I'm sorry, I just thought of his name.
Gotcha. Yeah, I was going to research it and flash it on the screen anyway. But
Okay, thank you.
um, so la- last question in this segment. So John Doe, Jane Doe, anybody out there listening right now, what's one action you'd recommend for someone to move towards more authentic themselves?
Let me give you two things. The first thing I'm going to give you is to recognize that authenticity begins in the inner voice, listening to yourself. And there's a lot of noise around, so people don't always know how to listen to themselves. So I'm going to give you a tip on how to listen to yourself. You talk to yourself every day. Every day you ask yourself three questions. You ask, what time is it? You ask, what am I going to wear? And you ask, what am I going to eat? And I have not seen anyone come outside naked, so I know that people get the answer to what are they going to wear. So what I suggest to people to do is examine how the answer comes to you. When you say, what time is it? Do you get a vision? Do you get a feeling, a gut feeling? When you say, what am I going to wear? Do you get a memory of what you wore before? Does something make you joyful? Or if it's a professional day, or do you see it? What am I going to eat? Do you smell it? Do you feel? Look at how the answer comes. It's usually from one of your six senses. You see it, smell it, touch it, feel it, whatever. So that's a clue for how your voice speaks to you. I'll give you an example. When I lost 30 pounds, I went to the resale shop and found this beautiful orange St. John suit, and it's size 8. And I just knew I was something in this size 8 suit. And I've had it ever since. And whenever I want to feel joyful, I wear that jacket. That jacket is probably 30 years old and tattered. Like I looked for it in my closet this morning, couldn't find it, but I know I still have it because I'm not getting rid of it because of how it makes me feel. And I know when I have that feeling that I pay attention because that's my voice, the spirit, and what have you speaking to me. So start there and recognize how you speak to yourself so you can listen to yourself more clearly. And then take time and reflect and listen. They say you should meditate every morning and every evening as well. And that calms you a bit, gives you your direction, and connects you more with your authenticity. And the second thing I would suggest to people, I invite you to take my authenticity assessment. It's a complimentary tool that gives you 9 questions, one on each of the questions on the grid you're looking at behind me. And it's at authenticityassessment.com. Or I'll make it easy. Just go to hollis.com, and on my homepage you'll see the link taking you there. It'll explain what the grid is and give you a link to take the assessment. Again, it's complimentary, but you end up with a score. First of all, there are 9 questions that are going to make you think a little bit about yourself, and it causes you to reflect, which is so much needed. And I suggest whichever question resonates most with you, start a family conversation, especially with your children. Help them to be more connected with who they are and how their voice speaks to them. And then build on that in your own family, in your own community, in your workforce, however you can share the message of authenticity. Because again, it takes every one of us to do that for us to make a change.
Hmm. No, I think I'm going to go do that because I'm curious. I consider myself, and I don't know if there's a scale of 1 to 10, but I consider myself probably like a good 8, right?
Okay.
I'm pretty authentic. I do have my times. I code switch like just about all of us do. Um, and there are times where I bite my lip or bite my tongue, which to me doesn't feel authentic because it's going to come out. It's just, what I'm
Right.
thinking is going to come out. And sometimes, I have to recess myself a little bit just to get through the moment in the different situations. But I think I'm about a good 8 out of 10. But I'm going to take the survey just to see, or answer the questions just to see
Yeah.
where I fall. And I encourage all of you to do the same thing. You never know what a simple quiz or a simple survey might reveal about yourself.
Could be life changing sometimes. Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's all for the Q&A segment, and now I'm going to move to my favorite segment with my guest called First Thoughts. But First Thoughts is sponsored by SRE Solutions Inc. Simple solutions for complex problems. SRE Solutions provides complete, robust, precise, and reusable real-world solutions satisfying and resolving your business needs. For more information, visit rebrand.ly/DHPSRE. Stands for Dave's Head Podcast, SRE. So, Dr. Norma, the way First Thoughts works, and as I always say to my guests, if you're not familiar, if you're joining us for the first time, shame on you, but I'm happy you're here. First Thoughts is an opportunity for me to give a word or a phrase to my guests to get their first thoughts. Obviously, they're not privy to this because that would ruin the impulsiveness of the first thought. So, Dr. Norma, are you ready for some first thoughts?
I'm ready. Let's go.
All right. Finally, somebody's excited. Everybody's usually
I'm
scared.
excited. I love this.
All right.
Like Toastmasters table talk. So,
Oh,
yes,
okay. Cool. Cool. All right. So first thought is perfection. If I said perfection to you, what's your first thought?
imperfection.
Hmm.
And so, perfection is what we talk about corporate today. And corporate America expects perfection from all of their leaders. But there's no such thing as perfection. I even have a book title that I'm toying with about the value of imperfect leadership. Because when you think
Hmm.
about authenticity, authenticity accepts your imperfections as well as your perfections. So
Yeah.
perfection should never be expected. And I would, if you're a parent, please do not raise your child to think they're supposed to be perfect, because
Hmm.
that is an impossible goal to meet, and you'll set them up for failure by doing that.
Gotcha. Yeah, I wouldn't say I was raised that way, but I'm a Capricorn through and through, and we are very much perfectionists, and so I have struggled, continue to struggle with perfectionism. I'm probably my harshest critic, and so sometimes that's very overwhelming. Sometimes it's just, all right, dude, relax. You're not perfect,
I
but
know
it's
about
everything in
Capricorn.
between.
Yes, I'm
Yeah.
on the cusp. I'm the last day of Sag, so I've spent my whole life, and writing this was all Capricorn. But I'm glad to
Okay.
be Sagittarius now. But yes,
No, I hear you. Listen, Capricorns have its pluses and minuses with the perfectionism thing. We're going to get it right a lot of times, but it's times we get it wrong, especially when we shouldn't get it wrong, that really weighs on us.
yeah.
All right. So next first thought, perception. If I say perception to you, what's your first thought?
Perception is a word that I use a lot because in my work with people, what I do is help them change their perspective so they have a
Mm-hmm.
different perception of life, of themselves, and what have you. As a transformational strategist, I like to find what perceptions they have so I can see where they may need to shift them, or where they, I won't say need to, but where I can discuss the possibility of shifting them. Because growth to me is changing your perception. When you think about getting educated, education means giving you a broader perception, a broader perspective of things. So when your perception changes, usually you change, and oftentimes it leads you to growth.
Hmm. Yeah, I always look at perception as something I can control, but can't control at all. Right. I have a role and responsibility in my fraternity in the Eastern region. I'm director of publicity, and I did a presentation this past weekend actually on how interpretation is something that's controllable but not controllable. And I always refer to the screen painting. I'll throw that on the screen on the post production, but the screen painting where the guy's like this, and you can go around the room. And I did that the other day. I asked somebody what they saw in this painting or what it looks like to them, and they said somebody screaming. And then I gave the definition. I'm blanking on the artist right now, but I gave the definition or what they interpreted or intended that painting to actually be, which is somebody a visual of somebody in crisis, not necessarily screaming, but in
Mhm.
crisis. And how one painting in that one room had two different perceptions. Multiply that by every single person that interacts with anything you put out marketing wise. So that
Mhm.
was the kind of the thing about it. But when you apply that to life,
Mhm.
perception is probably about 50% of what you put out and 50% of what people receive, and
Right.
so you only can control one of those two things. So that was the whole
Let me make
premise
one
of that.
more comment on perception based on what you just said. And I remember when I was studying the politics, and you would hear something would happen, and you go to MSNBC and you hear one perception of it, and you go to Fox,
Hmm.
totally different perception of the same event. But that
Yeah,
just goes to show how, as human beings, we perceive things differently, and just a different
yeah,
perception, just a slight change in perception, can make or break a relationship.
yeah. And so your point about values earlier, the conversation about values, your values for Fox News and values for MSNBC are completely different with the audiences. So it's
Exactly.
very easy for that perception to be guided towards you as well. Which is why I don't watch one of those two things. I'm not going to say which one, but I don't watch one of those two. Alrighty. Um, last first thought, forgiveness. If I say forgiveness, what's your first thought?
Thought comes to me is kindness, that they're related.
Mm-hmm.
Forgiveness is kindness sometimes to yourself. Forgiveness is not as much of forgiving the other person, but allowing yourself to forgive, because you grow more. When you don't forgive, you hold on to grudges, and that's negative energy. And negative
Mm-hmm.
energy never does not lead you to a healthy place.
Mm-hmm.
So forgiveness is a requirement. um, I remember when my mother passed, and my sister and I didn't quite get along and understand how to take care of my niece, who I raised. And I was angry for a long time, but I eventually forgave her, and allowed the healing to take place,
Mm-hmm.
which is very healthy. It's Unforgiveness is not a healthy situation, place to be in.
Mm-hmm.
So forgiveness is always, you don't have to forget, but you do need to
Yeah.
forgive. And you do, and forgiveness is more for as much or more for yourself than it is for the person
Mm-hmm.
you're
Yeah. I was waiting to jump in like double dutch to say you don't forget, you can forgive. Um, Yeah, no, I've talked about on this podcast a number of times. I went through a divorce a couple years ago, and it took me a while to get to the healing phase. And what I understood after I got to that phase finally is that I had to finally forgive, despite the fact that there would never be a day or situation I'd want to have an encounter with her or speak to her or anything like that. I had to forgive in order to get to the healing phase. And on a topic or paralleling that with authenticity, I really had to, channel everything that I was and am in order to let that forgiveness happen. I'm a forgiving person, but certain levels of pain kind of, challenge that authenticity of being a forgiving person. So, um, you know, again, going back to perfection,
in.
struggling with that and not wanting to forgive, and you don't need that to move forward. Yes, you do. Um, doing it the right way because you got 15 people telling you got to do things a different way. um, but yeah, forgiveness, I think, is the core of a lot of ways we can heal, looking at politics, looking at our communities. If we can get that as a core thing that we all do, it'll make our lives and our journey so much easier, I think.
It would. And then you talked about how authenticity feels. So you talk about
Hmm.
forgiveness. Forgiveness feels better, and it
Yeah.
feels more authentic than the anger and the problems that come with not forgiving. So
Yeah. Absolutely. Okay, so that's the end of First Thoughts. In this season, I started something called TO First Thoughts, where I'm turning over the power to my guests before we wrap up to offer a first thought to me. So, Dr. Norma, if you wanted to fire something at me for my first thought, what would it be?
I just have a question. First of all, is which fraternity are you in?
Phi Beta Sigma.
Phi Beta Sigma. Okay, I'm not familiar with
Mm-hmm.
that. That one wasn't as popular when I was coming up, but many of them.
Yeah.
So, first thought to you: why did you name your show Dave's Head?
Hmm. So, my natural personality, I think and overthink and analyze and overanalyze. And I have situations where I'll sit and talking to yourself. I do. So I meant to say this when you mentioned it earlier. I talk to myself every single day out loud, verbally.
Good for
It's
you.
just part of my natural personality. And so what I found during COVID is it's a lot easier to do that when there are people around you. And when COVID happened, there was literally no one around me. So I'm talking and my voice is echoing off the walls. But my only interaction with society when COVID was going on was either on social media or the news. And what I saw was there was just a bunch of misinformation, a bunch of fear, a bunch of panic, and whether it's well placed or not. The reason I started my podcast, the original purpose, was to bring guests on who had expertise, who could talk to people, and say, hey, do this with finance. Our first guest was about finance. Make sure your finances are good through this crisis. Make sure that you're doing this with your health. When George Floyd was murdered, we had a state trooper on to talk about gun violence and policing and those types of things. And so it really, the genesis of it was to get factual information out to, as relates to COVID, ease people's minds and produce a plan for them as relates to life stuff like George Floyd and politics and crisis to get facts out there. And so all these things kind of sit in my head every single day. And so that's where the naming of Dave's Head comes from, because there's a way for me to get the things that are in my head out there and bring audience or bring guests on who have expertise in the things that are bouncing around in my head, so that one, I can get clarity, but two, the information can get out there to the populace. And so that's where it came from.
Well, I applaud you, and I really applaud all those of your generation and beyond and younger, because what I'm experiencing as a former bureau owner and a professional speaker and coach and what have you is that your generation and younger are far more open to
Mm,
listening to the wisdom of the elders that want to share it with you.
mm,
In my generation, you didn't do that stuff because you're supposed to be perfect. So, but
yeah.
you guys recognize that there is no perfection, and I really love the way we come up, the way your generation comes on TV on the politics, and so many brilliant
Mm,
minds that are sharing, and so many African American brilliant minds, men and women, sharing so eloquently. So I have a great deal of hope for the future because of the
mm,
awareness that you and your generation bring to the world. And I certainly applaud you and everyone who is seeking to make a difference and speaking up and not afraid to speak up and being authentic and sharing and touching others and all the things we talked about, because that's what it's going to take. And it's a harder, much harder job for you guys. And those
yeah.
that criticize generations before, every generation does as much as they can to do it. When I was watching recently the young people on college campuses protesting, I said, well, dang, I
Mm,
did that. When Dr.
yeah.
King was born, I was leading the march. I mean, dang, we're still doing the same thing. And as much as
Mm,
we think we're making a difference, the dent is so minuscule and the gap is wider and wider. So don't ever think it's time to stop fighting to make a difference and fighting to make the world the way we want a difference, and make it the difference
mm,
that you can do, and helping your children to know who they are so they can make the difference that they are fortified to make. Because if it ain't us doing it, who's gonna do it? We got to do it.
yeah.
Got to
Yeah.
do it.
No, I definitely appreciate that, and thank you. I will say, I think in this generation, the white noise is a lot louder than
Yes.
I think in previous generations, because social media, because of competing ideologies and all those things.
And now
And so the
AI.
chat,
Hmm.
and now AI, yeah, which makes it worse, right? AI is only getting smarter every day.
Yes.
Um, and so where the challenge really comes in and where we really got to dig deep is being persistent and not giving up on keeping the truth and information and facts and research and all the things that are rooted in, truth.
Right.
Get those things and keep putting those things out there. Saturation. That's the word I was looking for. I was trying to find a word. Keep
Right. Right.
saturating.
Mhm.
Keep saturating the good info. And I hope that eventually it'll squeeze out the bad. I mean, that's kind of where we are at this point.
And another
Getting
thing,
back to authenticity and a question before of how do we move forward, that's kind of one of the things I was thinking. Just saturate, just keep pounding, keep banging that same nail. Eventually, you'll push through.
don't stop. And you also said something I want to just emphasize. You said dig deep. And that's
Hmm.
what people are not doing a lot of. They're just all superficial on the surface. So you got to dig deep because deep,
Yeah.
the secrets of life are hidden within us. And you
Hmm.
can't get it unless you dig deep. Take time and
Yeah.
dig deep. Do that reflection, evaluate, assess, be authentic. So that's
Absolutely.
that's important. Yeah.
Well, Dr. Norman, this was an absolute pleasure. I know. I hope that I wouldn't say I know. I hope that we can do a part two at some point. As I always do, though, before I let you go, I'd invite you. If there's anything you want to talk about or promote, feel free to do so now.
Well, as I mentioned, the authenticity assessment, I certainly encourage you to do that. If you take the assessment and it is complimentary, then you will receive some more information about. I have a free opportunity every second Tuesday at 5 o'clock p.m. Pacific time. And I come online and talk about activating your authenticity. I've been doing this for a number of years, and I give you tips and techniques. And plus, you hear from other people. You get in some small groups sometimes, and it's we all have the authenticity in us, but I want to turn the key to activate it. So that's what I'm doing on those Tuesdays. But it starts with taking the assessment, authenticity assessment. No, normahollis.com. That's easier. My name is right there. You can see how it's spelled, normahollis.com. There is a link on the first page, home page, to take the assessment. And feel free to peruse around if you like and learn about the grid that I didn't get a chance to talk about today, because it's that was something channeled through me to help society become more authentic and slow down a little bit. So thank you, Dave. And I
Excellent.
would love to come back and let me know when you're ready. I'll be ready for you.
Absolutely. And I think we got our first topic already. We're going to go through the grid step by step next time you come on.
That would be perfect. Absolutely. Yeah. It's been a
All
pleasure.
right. Well, absolutely. And Dr. Norma, as I've been saying to my guests all season long, have a great rest of 2024.
I promise you I will, as long as you do the same.
Absolutely. Thank you.
All right. It's a deal.
My absolute favorite segment of my podcast is my GRIN, which stands for Great Reason to Be in Love with Now. Before we talk about the great reason to be in love with now, check out Opus Clip. Opus Clip is the #1 AI video clipping and editing tool that repurposes your long videos into viral short videos in just one click. For more information, visit rebrand.ly/DHP Opus Clip. That's rebrand.ly/DHP Opus Clip. Last episode, I talked about a number of things, but I concluded my GRIN and shared this quote with you. And I went back and looked at it, and it resounded with me. It resonated with me, excuse me. Regardless of what happens on November 5th, it's going to be okay. Focus on what you can control, how you can positively impact your life and the life of others. And motivate yourself daily to take the next step on your path. In an environment of uncertainty, being able to work through it is mentally, physically, and emotionally healthy. When you think about coping with things, coping with the results of this election, coping with things that occur the next 4 years, it's important to have a plan of action, how to do that. Greater Good Magazine, which is a magazine that provides science-based insights for a meaningful life, had an article back during COVID in 2020. 7 ways to cope with uncertainty. What should we do when everything feels so out of control? It's an article by Christine Carter, and talking about coping with uncertainty, she says some of the following things. She says, living with so much uncertainty is hard. Human beings crave information about the future in the same way we crave food, sex, and other primary rewards. Our brains perceive ambiguity as a threat, and they try to protect us by diminishing our ability to focus on anything other than creating certainty. They did a study, she talks about, where participants in the study who were told that they had a 50% chance of receiving a painful electric shock felt more anxious and agitated than participants who believed they were definitely going to receive a shock. What does that say? What does that mean? It means the anticipation of the pain was more stressful and created more anxiety than simply knowing that it was going to happen. So anticipating the possibility, will it, won't it, will it, won't it, I got to prepare for it, versus it's going to happen. I'm ready for it. Or maybe not ready for it, but it's going to happen, so nothing I can do to stop it. She says sometimes, maybe always, it's more effective not to attempt to create certainty. John Allen Paulus, might be getting that wrong, Paulus, said uncertainty is the only certainty there is. Knowing how to live with insecurity is the only security. Now, Christine gives 7 strategies to cope with uncertainty. I'm going to go through them. Some are very much more important to me than others and resonate more to me than others. The first one is don't resist. She says there's no doubt we're living through challenging times. Very relatable to today, even though this was written in 2020. But resisting the current reality won't help us recover, learn, grow, or feel better. Ironically, resistance prolongs our pain and difficulty by amplifying the challenging emotions we are feeling. There's real truth to the aphorism that what we resist persists. Acceptance allows us to see the reality of the situation in the present moment. It frees us up to move forward rather than remaining paralyzed by uncertainty, fear, argument. Acceptance is not the same as resignation. Accepting a situation doesn't mean that it will never get better. So obviously the resistance is in the boat, not in the aftermath. And so the result is the result. And so now we have to move forward despite, and I get it. We're just very fresh in this moment, right? Election a couple days ago. And so saying to move forward is a little disingenuous for me to say that to other people, because how we get through is how we get through. But in that same sense and regard, don't resist means simply don't let it simply consume your thoughts. And how can I fight this? And how can I stop this? We're living through troublesome times for some people, more than others for some, right? But resisting the reality of it is what this means to me. Don't resist the reality. It's happened. It's here. And now we must progress through life in spite of the reality. Number 2, invest in yourself, which I love this one. The best resource that you have right now for making a contribution to the world is you. When that resource is depleted, your most valuable asset is damaged. In other words, when we underinvest in our bodies, minds, or spirits, we destroy our most essential tools for leading our best lives. Don't be confused. Self-care is not selfish. Invest in yourself. Invest in yourself mentally, physically, health-wise, emotionally, containing, controlling, understanding your emotions. Invest in yourself to move yourself past this moment and get back to enjoying your life. Number 3, find healthy comfort items. Interesting. One of the most important ways we can invest in ourselves is to comfort ourselves in healthy ways. Keywords, healthy ways. Instead of turning to social media, junk food, or booze to soothe our rattled nerves, we can do better when we preemptively comfort ourselves in healthy ways. Make a list of your healthy ways to comfort yourself. Go for a hike, schedule a call with a friend, reflect on what you're grateful for. Watch a funny YouTube video. Go for a walk. Do anything. Watch, Hulu. I've been watching this great series lately. Love it. But those things may seem small, but they enable us to be the people we want to be. It enables us to let go of the anxiety. It enables us to not focus on all the stuff going on outside of our house, outside of our environment, outside of this moment. Doing things that feel good to us. Get a massage. Go to a chiropractor. I got an appointment next week. Do the things that put you in a place of comfort, to remove the continuous anxiety that we either create in our head or that really does exist. But there's ways to not focus on that, is what she's saying. Number 4, I wish I could instill this in so many people's heads, not just the what she's talking about, but the words I'm about to say. Don't believe everything you think. Perhaps the most essential stress reduction tactic that anyone has ever taught me, her, is not to believe everything I think. In uncertain times, it's particularly important not to believe thoughts that argue for the worst case scenario. It can be helpful for us to consider worst case scenarios so that we can weigh risks and actively prevent disasters. Right? Go back and look at the quote. Failure to plan is planning to fail. Totally 100% get it. But, she says, when we believe these stressful thoughts, we tend to react emotionally, as though the worst case is already happening in real life instead of just in our heads. We grieve for things that we haven't actually lost and react to events that are not actually happening. This makes us feel threatened, afraid, unsafe, when we are simply alone with our thoughts or in the comfort of others who enable those thoughts and share those thoughts. Our negativity bias can also be something that sets us up for failure. Expectations can become self-fulfilling prophecy. Instead of buying into every stressful thought, we can actively imagine the best possible scenario. I will give you a prime example. Yesterday, I had a follow-up appointment with my primary care physician, and she works out of two different facilities. When I made the appointment, I simply copied and pasted, or just copied, not really copy and pasted, copied the calendar event and changed the date, not realizing that I put the wrong location because that was the location the last time I saw her. And so I go to my doctor's appointment, and they look me up on the computer and say, sir, you have an appointment at the other office. Crap. They say, let me see if we can see you here with another doctor. I'm like, okay, cool. They come back out and say, oh, we're full, we can't do it. But I made an appointment for you in a couple hours at the other place. It's going to be with another doctor because yours is busy, but at least it's at the other place and you can be seen today. I leave, walk to my car, start driving, and the first thing that pops in my head, well, I didn't see her actually put the appointment in. I wonder if she just found a block and it came out to tell me. And watch she gets back to her computer, that block's going to be full by then because she didn't actually put it in, she just found a block. Sure enough, I'm driving, my phone rings, and lo and behold, the lady calls me and says, I'm so sorry. By the time I got back to my computer to go put the appointment in, somebody had already claimed it. So we made another appointment for another day. But self-fulfilling prophecy, right? I went to a negative, preparing for the worst case scenario that didn't even happen yet. It wasn't even reality, just because I analyzed every possible situation that could happen out of her simply saying, I've got another slot for you. Now, part of that's me being me, Capricorn me, where I look at all the paths. Part of that is me creating a situation of anxiety, even if it's a minuscule, because I wasn't anxious about it. It was just something I said, kind of sarcastically. Why don't you go back to her desk and that appointment be filled? But putting the worst case scenario in our heads repeatedly will raise anxiety levels and stress levels. Now, this wasn't anxiety to me. This wasn't stress. But multiply that by doing that every single day, constantly all day, believing what I think, self-fulfilling prophecy. Over time, you're like, well, I thought this last time. It became my reality. I'm thinking it this time. It makes sense to me. That's going to become my reality too. Stress. Number 5, pay attention. The opposite of uncertainty is not certainty, it's presence. Even when it feels like everything is out of control, we can still control what we pay attention to. We can turn off our alerts to keep the news or social media from hijacking our awareness. Please. Attending to what's happening within us at any given moment keeps a crappy external reality from determining our inner truth. It allows us to cultivate calm, open-mindedness, and non-reactivity. Really think one of the things I'm going to focus on over the next few months as we lead into the new year, besides my birthday and New Year's, is not consuming a lot of the news and notifications and social media that I sometimes find myself doing. Paying attention to what's going on with me, being present with what's going on with me, my responsibilities, and all those things are way more important than the opinions of some guy sitting in front of his computer eating a bonbon with spillage on his t-shirt halfway across the world or in the town over. Being present with what's actually going on here. And by being present, it takes uncertainty and makes it a little more certain. Number 6, stop looking for someone to rescue you. Now, this one could hit home for some people. When we act as though we are powerless, we get trapped in narratives that leave us feeling angry, helpless, and trapped. And we start hoping other people will save us from our misery. Rescuers tend to give us permission to avoid taking responsibility for our own lives. Say that again. Rescuers tend to give us permission to avoid taking responsibility for our own lives. On the other hand, emotionally supportive friends or therapists see us as capable of solving our own problems. They ask questions that help us focus on what we want to do instead of what we don't. When we take responsibility for our lives, we trade the false power of victimhood for the real power that comes from creating the life that we want. Again, false power and victimhood. Real power, taking ownership and creating the life that we want. I know I said it twice, but I'm going to say it again because it really sticks, right? Rescuers tend to give us permission to avoid taking responsibility for our own lives. It's much easier to sit back and let someone save you. It's much easier to sit back and let someone solve your problems. But where's the power in that? Where's the self-determination in that? Taking responsibility for your own life. Being present, as we talked about in number 5. Being present in the moment. Not letting the negative thoughts just spin in your head, but saying, you know what? I'm going to solve this problem so that I can move on with my life. That's taking ownership of your life. So stop looking for someone to rescue you. And in to parallel that to what we've been talking about with this election, a lot of people need to stop looking for the government to save them. Looking for a president or a party to save them. Be the catalyst for your own change. And when we invest in that more than a politician or a party, that's when we're empowered to do and take control of our own life. Number 7, lastly, find meaning in the chaos. Social psychologists define meaning as it applies to our lives as, quote, an intellectual and emotional assessment of the degree to which we feel our lives have purpose, value, and impact. Meaning and purpose are well springs of hope. When the world feels scary or uncertain, know what meaning we have for others, and feeling a sense of purpose can ground us better than anything else. So just don't wait for this ordeal to be over. In this case, the results of the election, the pending inauguration, the next 4 years, and everything in that time frame. Don't be resigned to your misery while we wait for those 4 years to pass by. What have you always wanted to do? What outcome are you hoping for? How can you make a real life in this? Answer those questions and live that life. Find meaning, find joy, find love, find happiness in the midst of all this chaos that is not only our political environment, but this country in general. Find meaning. Find your purpose, find your future. Whether it's here in this country or not, there's some people who say they want to move. I had a conversation with someone yesterday, and he visited his sister in Australia. Said she loves it there. Been living there for years and years and years. She absolutely loves living there. And that may be a solution for you. Or it may be rallying your troops and tightening your circle and doing what's best to take the power back and what impacts your life. Find your meaning. Find your next step in the chaos of life. And so check out Greater Good Magazine, 7 Ways to Cope with Uncertainty, an article by Christine Carter written in 2020. And look at these 7 ways to cope with uncertainty. Don't resist. Invest in yourself. Find healthy comfort items. Now, for me, I need to probably lay off the chips, even some of the beers. But find healthy comfort items. Don't believe everything you think. Pay attention. Stop looking for someone to rescue you. And to me, the most important, find meaning in the chaos. I want to thank my guest, Dr. Norma Hollis, for stepping into Dave's Head. We had a great conversation about accountability and authenticity. Check her out on Instagram at Norma Hollis. Check her out on LinkedIn. Look for Norma Hollis, PhD, or you can use the name Norma Hollis, all one word. On Facebook, look for Authenticity You Now. All one word, Authenticity You Now. On YouTube, at Authenticize Me. It's a tough one to spell and say. Authenticize Me. Authenticize Me. Authenticize Me. Say it. Just keep saying it until you get it. Authenticize Me. And check out our website, authenticityassessment.com. Support our sponsors and partners, SRE Solutions, Inc., for all your PC support, troubleshooting, antivirus removal, backup, networking, all types of stuff. Check out SRE Solutions at rebrand.ly/DHPSRE. Check out Adapt to Adopt for all things and information and support around adoption. Check them out at rebrand.ly/DHPA2A. And lastly, our partner Opus Clips, to take your large clips and convert them to smaller clips that you can share on social media to promote your brand and do so much more. Check them out at rebrand.ly/DHP Opus Clip. That's DHP Opus Clip. And if you're interested in sponsoring or partnering with Dave's Head, check us out and we can certainly make it happen. Lastly, this season, I am going to leave you with a quote, as I said, for each episode. I think it's important, with everything that's happened since the last time we talked, to really look at look at this as a reflecting moment. And that's why I like this quote from Ralph Waldo Emerson. It says, "What lies behind us and what lies before us are tiny matters compared to what lies within us." It's going to be an interesting couple years, but we got to dig deep, look inside of us, and look at the impacts we can have, not only on ourselves, those that we care about in our communities, but the youth and so many more who need really support that we have to give them, and that they may fall short in being able to give to themselves. We're going to have to reach out, not down, not up, but reach out and support our fellow man, our fellow woman, our fellow children, and really elevate this nation and this world. There's a saying, each one teach one. Talk about it all the time. Not on this podcast, but I talk about it all the time outside this podcast. And that we have to be the ones to reach back sometimes, a lot of times, or as much as we can, and help people. There's going to be plenty of opportunities to do that the next 4 years. And we should take every one that we can. Because we don't know when we're going to have a rough patch and somebody's going to have to reach out and support us. So resolve, authenticity, and coping with uncertainty. All great reasons to be in love with now. That's all for this episode of Dave's Head. New episodes released on the second and fourth Friday of the month. For all things Dave's Head, check out our website at daveshead.card.co. Subscribe to watch new episodes on YouTube or Spotify video, or to listen via your preferred podcast player, go to anchor.fm/Dave's Head Pod. Thank you for watching or listening. As always, enjoy life, because life should be fun. Take care.